Hi guys, this is Miranda. I'm filming a little bit of an intro like a week after filming this podcast, just to explain that there will be some jumps and edits in this podcast because the purpose of the podcast has changed. I think the conversation is still really important. Pyasa is one of my favorite people in this world, and so I still wanted to share the magic of this episode with you with certain things reducted. But regardless of that, it's still an amazing conversation. It gives a little window into the connection that I have with her. She's one of my favorite people in the world, and I invite you to watch this. Tell me your thoughts, and if you want contact information or anything for Piazza to be able to work with her, just reach out to me and I'll send it to you.
Hi, everybody. This is Miranda. We are back for another awesome conversation today. Today, the guest is another person very special to me. I feel gifted to know this woman, and I actually met her first in Anarchapulco 2020. I came prepared because she came up to my crochet table and she said, I want something. Can we trade one of my books for something here? And I think it was like a water bottle holder or something that I gave you in exchange. But I've kept this book through all the series because it's awesome. It's called the Intimacy Adventure Playbook, and it's a bunch of little exercises that you can do with your partner to get intimacy and connection beyond just what most people think of as intimacy. So without further ado, let me introduce Piazza. And how are you, my lovely, lovely sister friend?
Miranda, thank you. Yes, I'm doing great. Happy to be here with you. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
I've also been looking forward to this. Now, Piazza, you're somebody who I have known for many years, and we've worked together for many years, and I want to talk about that a little bit because you reached out to me after the Anarchist series and was like, I think you need some help regulating your nervous system. Are you interested in working with me? And you helped me with all sorts of modalities. Those were primarily virtual sessions. But what I started to understand doing those meetings with you and getting that help from you is you are a Jill of all trades as far as healing and energetic work and trauma work and everything. Like, I don't know if I even have a full concept of everything that you're capable of doing. So I want to know, my first question is, what led you down this path to, like, what was the catalyst? I think I know, but I want the audience to get a kind of idea of what started you down this road.
That's a really good question. So let's see. I guess it would begin at the very beginning of my life, maybe even my time in the womb. Just being exposed to a lot of trauma. Well, let me correct that. So I would like to say that experiences happen, whether they register in our system as a trauma or not, is how we respond. So I had a lot of experiences as a child that were really big experiences that registered in my system as trauma. And so I suppose my path of healing, my own personal path of healing, is what brought me to acquire all of these gifts, all of these abilities, all of these trainings, right? So I've been trained in a lot of modalities. And I would say that I was just thinking this morning that a lot of all of what I know has been came from kind of like a place of insecurity of like, oh, I need to know more. I need to know more about trauma. I need to know more modalities, like continually having to acquire more education. And so that in that time through the ages, I would say came a lot out of a certain part of insecurity of thinking that I'm not enough, right? Which I think a lot of people can relate to. And I'm just so grateful that at this time, all of those things have woven together. And the more that I recognize that my work is getting out of the way and allowing the force of creation to flow through me, you know, like my intuition, and the more effective my work can be. So, shorter answer to your question is I experienced a lot of trauma, especially below the age of 12. So it was really in my formative years that took me many, many years to unravel. And, it's an ongoing journey. It's like an upward spiral. We heal things and we come up and we heal them again on like a whole nother level. But there's freedom in each level, right? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I knew a little bit about that, but I was also curious because you've mentioned your experience with Lyme disease and how you essentially found an alternative way to deal with that isn't necessarily the like you're fucked, just take some meds for the symptoms situation. So can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, I contracted Lyme disease in, I don't know, it was during my Saturn return, actually. I don't know what year that was. It was some time ago. I got bit by a tick and I got very sick. I had arthritis that went from, it was like zigzagging through my body from one joint to another. And it even went into my brain. And it was extreme. But I didn't get diagnosed for quite some time. I didn't really know about Lyme disease. It was kind of new when this happened. And anyways, when I did find out what it was, I I was resistant to the whole allopathic path. I wasn't going to go take antibiotics. And so I really just followed my intuition. Something would arise, I would hear about ozone therapy. And so I was doing ozone therapy, having the blood taken out of my body and mixed with ozone and put back in. So it was like one modality to another. But the biggest piece, I think, besides the physical, was when I realized that I had no will to live. There was a no will to live energy that was still resonating inside of me. So it was a gift to realize I had to, find my desire to live and really clear that. I think it was very ancestral, actually. I think I picked that up from my dad, who took his own life when I was a very young age. So yeah, I think that was the biggest piece. But I do feel that within healing, it's we have to work with the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional, right? So physically, I was doing different modalities that helped along the way, and I would do a modality until I felt called to something else. So it was super intuitive, and I had to do a lot of emotional healing, spiritual healing. So all of those were pieces that I believe are important for any what I like to call dis-ease, because I would say dis-ease is predominantly, most often, and this might piss some people off, trauma. It's really like trauma, trapped survival energy still stuck in the system.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. There definitely is that emotional quality when it comes to these sorts of illnesses, and I'm starting to like fully realize that myself because one of the things that you do a lot and that you've done a lot is a lot of work with women and women's health. You've done retreats teaching women everything from trauma release to pelvic floor therapy and all of these things, right? And anybody who saw me at Anarchapulco knew that I was running around like singing the praises of you because we had and the type of session I'm gonna preface this by saying the type of session that we ended up doing together in terms of like what we did before Anarchapulco this year was tailored to me. It's not something you normally do in the way that you did it. I'm not going to get too specific on it, but what I am going to say is it was focused on my health as a woman. It was focused on a lot of things that I've been dealing with as far as endometriosis. And, anybody that's known me for years knows I've had issues with acne, which is principally an issue with hormones, and an issue with hormones is an issue with stress and also an issue with trauma, right? And since then, um, I am starting to really see, because you know this, I was tearing up rose petals and I was rubbing them on my belly and I was rubbing them anywhere else I thought I had physical issues. And I was telling myself, you had told me something before we got started that day that said, don't be afraid to take up space. And I knew what you meant by that. It was like, move around, be willing to stretch out and everything. But that ended up being a theme throughout the experience, right? It was okay because I gained weight and I'd gotten officially overweight, and I had had a conversation with myself with these rose petals and everything, saying it's okay to have taken up more space for a while, but you don't have to take up space to be seen and loved. And then I started to tell my body, okay, you can let go of all this inflammation. You can let go of all of this. And my ovarian cyst pain is gone. I haven't gone to get an ultrasound to see if the thing is gone itself, but I suspect it is. Um, I've lost 6 kilos since then. I have, completely like recomped my body. And a lot of that's work with diet and stuff. But also, it's interesting the whole will to live thing, because when there's somebody who's experienced as much trauma as me, you do get kind of tired of fighting and going when things feel so heavy after a while. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit a long-winded thing to say, but I wanted to share that because, you've had such a profound effect on my life, and I really appreciate you, and I just want you to know how much, and I want the people watching this to know how much. Um, So I do want you to tell me a little bit about your work with women. And I know you regularly engage in these retreats and things of that nature. Tell us about what you do in regards to that.
Mm, okay. Well, I mean, I do work very intuitively. Like you said, it was tailored to you. So my work is really tailored to each person that I'm working with. And but my background is in somatic sexology and somatic trauma therapy, but with tons of other certifications, right? I said I was like an overeducated person for quite a while, or I still am, but now it's really weaving together. So I am teaching when it's necessary, and it's kind of almost necessary for probably every woman out there, is internal pelvic release work. So if I'm working with people in person, I am doing that with them, if it's necessary, or I'm teaching them how to do it. And so many other things, but I think that's maybe what you're asking about to share.
It's the trauma release stuff we've done in the past. It's the energetic cleansing. It's the work with medicine. It is we did some guided meditation of sorts in which you had me have a conversation with my reproductive system. That
Yeah.
was way more profound than I expected going into it. It's a lot of stuff. Like you said, it's intuitive and it's multifaceted. It's not like you're not a one trick pony. That's for sure.
And I do make a lot of stuff up in the moment at this point, right? For a lot of times it was like sticking to a rigid uh, structure with different types of modalities, but now it's just weaving together into intuition, and I'm pulling in lots of different things. So yes, I do muscle testing, and I use charts where I'm checking for a lot of things within a person, whether it's trapped emotions or old vows, old commitments that we have made, maybe have made in this lifetime, or shall I say, I don't, whether it's true or not, past lifetimes, other timelines, right? Things that affect us in the moment where we are still committed to something that's not serving us anymore. So energy work, the pelvic work, somatic trauma therapy, which does include TRE, trauma intention release exercises, which is something that I'm going to bring to the gratitude retreat. We're going to do a couple sessions there. And what that does is helps us to access the autonomic tremor response in the body. So when we experience a trauma, and we don't allow those stress hormones that just got released to play out in the way that they need to, either through a fight response or a flight response, that can get trapped in the body. And so when we can access the autonomic tremor response, we can shake it out, right? Tremoring, shaking. So releasing and just clearing our vessels of that trauma. So it's a way that we can clear things without having to be stuck to a story still, you know. We can just unconditionally let it go, let it work through us, let it shake out through our body. And it's really bringing the body back to a state of homeostasis. And then the medicine that I work with, is it also can do that at times. There's purges that can happen, right? So it could be shaking. It could be a scream that never got expressed, a primal scream that really needed to come through. It could be laughter. Or it could be going into like a very deep samadhi space, right? So there's more, but there's different ways that the medicine can bring us, help us to purge whatever is trapped in the system, which is basically holding us back from being in the present, right? Like here in the present, pretty much everything's really okay all the time.
Yeah.
But when we're trapped, when we have trapped survival energy within our systems, we can be trapped in the past, really. It's keeping us in another timeline. So all of the modalities that I bring in, I don't know if I left some out, all of those are really to support the integration of the medicine so that when people work with me in ceremony, that it's not just a peak experience that then, you know, will fade out, but that we really, that the whoever receives this medicine really is able to integrate it, to embody all of what came through, the messages, the insights, and use the new neural pathways that are formed from working with this medicine to create new habits and new ways of being, right? Because when we work with this medicine, there's more neural networks that are created. And so if we start practicing integrating, so that's where the other work that I do really comes in, is helping people to really create the change that they want. And because the medicine doesn't do it all on its own, we have to learn those new ways of being where, you know, for some people, feeling peaceful, feeling free of anxiety is like a foreign concept. So maybe then we have to practice how to do that, you know? And then those old habits die off when we're not using those old neural pathways. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I'm also thinking back to my experience, and the big theme with that was like it's okay to fall apart because most people, they know me as somebody who's really strong. You know, I keep it together, right? And you would ask me like, what happens, if you let yourself fall apart? And it's like, well, I'm afraid I won't put myself back together again. And for me, that was my own lesson. And yeah, I can see how it would be totally individual with people. But there is something really special about the way, because I've had ceremonies of this, medicine with various people. I've had the full spectrum of possibilities. I've had the worst possible, and in my opinion, I've had the best possible experiences with it. And I found how you did it. I really loved the intuitiveness. You were putting essential oils on your hands, and all of a sudden I was smelling pine or something else super strong. Or I remember when I felt the rose petals just drop onto me. And I just picked it up. I'm like, oh, this is soft. And then I just kind of popped it in half, and I was like, oh, that was satisfying. And then I just proceeded to destroy every rose petal that came in contact with me. And I think that was exactly what I needed. I needed that moment to kind of fall apart. I needed that moment to acknowledge, you know, I've tried a lot of stuff to fix body situation, stress situation. And I think the biggest thing that it does is it really, it, I've described the experience, and maybe you can expand on this or give your own spin. But when people ask me what this medicine is like, I'm like, it's like having a conversation with your favorite librarian, only the library is your head and the books are all over the place. So you're talking to the librarian and you're discussing things that are important to you. Meanwhile, the librarian's just like, yeah, okay. And have you thought of this? And then you could kind of come out of it, and the library might not be perfectly tidy, but you feel like you can think a little bit better. And I think that is what it does for a lot of people. Um,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that analogy?
I love that analogy. um, yeah, I love how you just described that. It's humorous and true. And at the same time, I guess I would just bring in as well that this medicine is an entheogen, which means it's AKA the God molecule, as opposed to the spirit molecule, which the vine from the Amazon is considered the spirit molecule. So the spirit molecule or spirits are in the world of duality still. And entheogen is bringing out the God within you, right? The one who knows. So going back to like psychedelic, um, as in the spirit molecule, psychedelic actually means mind manifesting, and an entheogen is bringing out the God within. So it's we're able to be in touch with our own innate wisdom, that God particle which is within each of us. It's just miraculous and amazing to witness how much gratitude people feel from working with this molecule. Like, it's just mind blowing. Even when there's a lot of tears, there's working through a lot of grief, there's difficult, challenging times, which also do happen. That's the reality of it, is things that need to be let go of come up, and they're let go often in a very somatic way. And then
Can you
there's
tell
this
us a little bit
repentance.
more what somatic means? Because this is
Yeah,
a phrase that you've said quite a bit, and I think it's important to touch on that in this context.
yeah, great. So somatic simply really means body based. And so I'm a somatic trauma therapist. So I'm working using the body, using the different channels of awareness within the body to um, to remediate for trauma remediation, right? And same with the sexologist part, right? Somatic sexologist. So we're not just talking; we're actually having felt experiences in the body. Um, and, somatic is a word that's being thrown around all the time these days, I've noticed. Like, it's somatic yoga, it's somatic dancing. It's just a catchphrase that people are starting to use, but I've been using it for probably like over 15, 20 years, something like that, right? Somatic, because it actually is a somatic based modality, which dancing and yoga are, but they are by their very nature. They are somatic. We don't have to say, it's kind of redundant. Um,
Uh-huh.
so it's kind of confusing as far as I can see, like out there with what's going on with the whole somatic movement, but it's good. People are getting more into their bodies. So somatic, body based. Yeah. So not just talk, it's not like talk therapy, it's experiential.
Yeah, I think there's value to that. And, I don't think I had a good understanding of what somatic meant before this. I've heard it. Um, and it reminds me of, because I've had people ask me, like, oh, you just like to do aerial stuff because, like, it's fun, or whatever. And, like, I've thought a lot about it. I've had a lot of conversations about it. And it is because it's somatic work. Because when you are up in the air, supported by the grip of your hands or other body parts, you can't be stuck in here thinking about what's worrying you. You have to pay attention to your body and sink into what you feel in your body, or you can get really hurt or potentially die, right? So I think that's a big part of it. And I think that's why a lot of people who've been through a lot of trauma-based things tend to go for these sorts of art forms where you're forced to be in your body, and I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you think of the trauma release thing. Because I remember when you first mentioned, hey, do you want to try the trauma release? I'm like, okay, well, like, what's going to happen with that? And, you're like, well, we'll see, right? And you had mentioned some people cry, some people scream. I'm a laugher, as you know, with anything, especially when it comes to my pelvis. And my teachers have found this, like when they try to stretch me too far, I will start laughing uncontrollably. And that's what's happened during my trauma release sessions. But there is something really important to sinking back into your body. And I think that's a huge part of why you're so effective in what you do, is because when we bypass the monkey mind and just like focus on what's going on in the body, things can actually move out with trying to assign a label to it. That's how
Absolutely.
I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just wondering, actually, when you're up on the silks, have you ever had the experience where all of a sudden you just start
Yeah.
like trembling? So that's accessing that
Okay.
release. You're having one of those releases. Sometimes holding your body in a particular asana or exercise, we can also access that same thing. So it's a good point. Yes. All of that stuff getting into the body, out of the mind, into the body. That's been one of my taglines for a very long time. Yeah.
I mean, and it makes sense, and you're right. And like when I get into those the most, or when you're in like a suspended split thing and you're just trying to hold on and everything's kind of shaking, it all comes down to the pelvis. And I know it sounds like people can be like, okay, that's catchphrasy. And when I first, like 2020 is when I started to really acknowledge, um, that things aren't always what we seem. People say if you have trauma, you go talk to a therapist. And, using your body or, don't do any of that. And I think I think that's almost a cop out or a psyop maybe to keep people disconnected from their bodies, because I was somebody who was a hardcore skeptic of a lot of this stuff, but I decided to be open-minded because I was like, I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to suffer anymore. And I think people have to really get to that point. Um, but I do feel grateful that you reached out to me after the series and you found ways to connect with me and, you know, intuitively suggest things that really have had a big effect on my life. I think that's really special. And one of the other things that I want to talk about in regards to what you do, and this is a recent thing of yours, is part of why I wanted to highlight it. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I can see your smile. Is I don't know what to call it. Is it like telepathy? I don't know, but you've been sending me little videos of you sticking coins to walls with your mind and they just stay, of you with a total blackout mask on, able to read books, tell colors. Um, what what sent you into all of that, and is it just an extension of what you've already been doing?
So good. I love, is it just an extension of what I've already been doing? Yes, I realized that recently. I'm like, so how does this psi work? Like PSI, right? Psi skills, mind sight, seeing without the physical eyes, telekinesis, or how does that fit in with everything else I'm doing? Because I just made a new page on my website. And I'm like, if people come to me for the ceremonial work and all of this other stuff, and then they see that, what are they going to think? And I was realizing like how I could really weave it together and present it is that I'm devoted well, I've been calling myself an evolutionary activator for a very long time in my life. And that's actually the name of my website is Evolutionary Activation. So it's all about opening our minds, opening our consciousness, right? It's still the same theme actually, but just a different modality. So yeah, I was somewhat recently activated in opening my mind sight. And then my teacher asked me if I wanted to become a teacher. And so I did a teacher training, one-on-one mentorship with her. And actually now, she just created an app, which I'm contributing to for little telekinesis tips and things. And we're going to, yeah. So opening minds, consciousness expansion. It's the evolutionary activation of our humanity, right? Like remembering what we all have innately. I believe that all of these abilities, like mind sight, telekinesis, they are abilities that we're all born with, but we've forgotten. Somewhere along the way, we've been told, like we're a very left brain, logical, analytical, driven society, right? And coming back into the right brain, that's the creative, the intuitive, the feeling. And that is what can help us balance, right? Because the left brain, analytical, great. We need it. We need it to figure out how to get on this computer and make this recording, right? But we need to be balanced in both the right and the left hemispheres. So those practices of mind sight telekinesis are biofeedback. It's a biofeedback device. When we have difficulty doing it, it's letting us know that we're too much in the analytical mind, we're criticizing, we're questioning. But when we can really let go and surrender into the right side, which is considered also as the feminine and the masculine. So again, here we are finding the balance. And the feminine is emerging. This is coming into consciousness so much more these days. The mind sight, the telekinesis, I don't know, at least in my algorithm. I don't know about everybody else's, but I'm here to bring it more into the public, into people's lives for whoever wants to activate and remember this innate ability.
It sounds similar. I was having a conversation with my partner yesterday because he's had, the pleasure of living with me. And I'll say that, with all the seriousness in the world of living with me for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And he's always considered himself somebody very intuitive. And then there have been many situations throughout our relationship where I'll say something like, this is going to happen. And he's going to be like, okay, but what's your reasoning? And I can't, I don't, I feel that that's what's going to happen. And yesterday he admitted that I am way more right about these things that I can't explain than most people. And so is this really about intuition and being able to just trust that and move with that? Is that what it feels like to you?
Is this more than intuition? Is that what your question
No,
is?
no, is it really just related to intuition? Like when it comes to, for example, the mind sight without the eyes thing, does it
Mm,
feel like intuition when you're working with it?
Actually, that's a good question. So when we first start opening our mind sight, and let me describe that a little bit more. So mind sight is seeing without the physical eyes. And what happens, we use a complete blackout mask and we call them windows, will open up. So when we're working with a mindfold mask, it'll go in stages. It'll be like, oh, it's kind of like I see some light, I see some shadow. Well, now I can see kind of some color until eventually you can read. But in the beginning, some of that is using the intuitive perception. And I'm actually doing a lot of intuitive perception development with myself and with people, and it's also on that app. So that is different than the mind sight, which is a real time vision. Like when I have my mask on and I see you, I'm seeing you in real time. It's not remote viewing. It's not these other types of things. It is real-time vision. And what it may be, of course, there hasn't been a lot of like big money put into research, although it's sort of starting to happen on very small scale, is that we have receptors for light in our body. So there are people who are like seeing with their nose. This is the area that actually receives light that activates a lot of the mind sight, or this is the theory. But there's people who are seeing with their hands. There are people who are seeing out the back of their head. In my original training, I started seeing out my ear for a short time, and I remember when that was happening, because I have video of it. I'm like, oh no! I kept turning my head. I'm like, my
I
teacher was
remember
holding.
that.
Yeah, my teacher was holding stuff up on the screen to colors, and I'm like looking this way, and then I had to keep going like, oh no, and I was like going, oh no, now I'm seeing out my ear, and I said, I hope it doesn't last, and it actually went away. And now I'm open to it, but I was worried that I wouldn't have it in the front because I can actually walk around, bounce balls, do anything with my mind sight. But when it's over here, there's a lot of other issues like with proprioception, yeah. So
Yeah.
answer is intuitive is different than the actual practice of mind sight, but it's all a part of it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that stuff is fascinating. I think it's super fascinating, and I admit, like, you've been encouraging me for a while to just try with the coin, and I've even thought, oh, like I have some ideas, but I will admit I haven't done it yet. And the main reason I haven't done it is, and I know you talk about this a lot when it comes to the rebar stuff you do and the spoon stuff you do, is it's like that mental fear of failure of like, what does it mean if I'm the one person that can't do it, right? As silly as it is. And then we also have this like hyper productive mindset of like, okay, who am I if I spent an hour that I should have been working trying to keep a coin on the wall? Like, what
Uh,
does that really do, right? And so I do want to segue into it because one of the things that we wanted to bring in of what you do is you did this and they tried to make you sound like a crazy person, and I know better than anybody you're not crazy, but the vice thing with the spoon bending, right? And you've done the spoon bending, you've done breaking arrows with your throat, you've done rebar bending. I'm pretty sure we're doing the rebar bending. And so how does that fit into all of this?
yes. Okay. So every single thing we're talking about here, telekinesis, psychokinesis, mind sight, rebar bending with the throat, spoon bending, all of these things help us confront exactly what you were talking about. It's the analytical mind. It helps us confront that fear of failure. It helps us confront our insecurities, our comparison, all of those little critical voices that come from the analytical mind, right? So it all comes up right into the forefront. And that's why all of these things are not just kind of like cool things to do. They're actually they're really healing modalities because we have to work through whatever is presented to us. So, especially with the rebar bend, which we are going to be doing at the Gratitude Gathering in Acapulco in November, is so that is taking rebar, and everybody knows what rebar is. We use that to build houses. It is steel, a steel rod. We're putting it in the softest part of our necks, and then from my neck to my partner's neck. So it is now being supported by the pressure between the two of us holding up that steel rod. And at the right time, there's a whole, we build up into this and do processes to get there. At the right time, we are trusting. That's another level of it. Surrendering and trusting and walking forward towards each other. And the rebar just at first, there's fear will come up. You'll feel that rebar in your throat, but it's not going to puncture you, and you have to like still move through that resistance, and it will start to bend. So a lot of times what I do is I have people who are working together in partners with the rebar bend. They write in, and we tape it to the middle of the rebar. What is it that you want to break through? So often the word is fear, but what is it that you want are ready to break through? And so this practice offers, you know, like all these elements of making a commitment to something and following through, having good communication skills because you're working with another person, right? So sometimes the other person will start to back up because they get afraid, right? So you have to work together as a team, commit, make eye contact, and walk towards each other, and it will bend. It will bend. So all of these things are, yeah, like really healing modalities and consciousness expansion and
Yeah, so
fun.
I want
Also,
yeah,
it's fun.
I've seen videos of people doing it. Kat says that she did a virtual version of the spoon bending thing and that she managed to
Yeah,
do it. Um
and follow.
and yeah, and Paolo, yeah. And I wanted to go back because you had mentioned when we were talking about the medicine, because I think this all has to do with the same thing, right? You had mentioned the God molecule and how it's communicating with the God molecule inside of you, right? And that's a thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand, because when it comes to these medicines, be it, you know, the Amazonian plant, or, you know, there's so many different medicines out there. People like to assign outward spirits to these things, that this is grandmother this, or this is Otak, or this grandfather or whatever, right? And something that I found, and it's something that I've had to contend with, because you go into these experiences thinking you're going to have a conversation with God, or God's best friend, or God's sister, or whatever. And what really ends up happening, maybe there is a conversation and maybe there is a voice, but what I found, especially working with the medicine that will be at this retreat, and we are being purposefully vague here for a reason. If people want to know what we're talking about, email me at coproducer@anarchapulco.com and we'll talk about it. Um, but beyond that, I do want to mention that, like, my experiences, like, yeah, it was like having a conversation with the librarian, like I described. But I also knew subconsciously that the librarian was me, you know, and I was pulling from all my different, you know, experiences. Like, I was hearing Bear Hart's voice, I was hearing Brother Ali's voice, which is my favorite rapper, because he kept saying, one of his lyrics is, too much beauty to behold by one person. He's talking about how he's blind. He's like, I'm blind, or he says, I'm blind in the eye because I can't take the world in, because there's too much beauty to behold by one person. And that's what I kept hearing throughout the experience, right? But then then I'm remembering how Kat was in the staff retreat and we were having a ceremony, and she was telling everybody, I'm doing back surgery on myself. She went in with terrible back pain, came out with no back pain. And I was like, oh, I can do reproductive surgery on myself, which is what I was doing with the rose petals and stuff, but it worked, you know? And I think that all of this, a lot of what your work has done, even though it's so wide and there's so many things that people might consider random, it's really all talking to that little morsel inside of you that is just a little sliver of God. Um, and I know a lot of people take this as, well, I am God, and they can get into this like real egotistical aspect of that. And how do you deal with that? Because it's bound to happen. You know, I'm sure you've had experiences where you're working with somebody and they come out and they're like, I'm God. And it's like really intense and kind of weird. Or maybe they start idolizing you as a god, you know, like Bear and I talked about this, and that's a thing he deals with a lot, is like, I'm not your God, you know, I'm just here to help you get in touch with that bit inside of you. So, how do you deal with that in your work when you work with people, whether it be with medicine or just with psi stuff, or the energetic cleansing, or the trauma release, or any of the other dozens of modalities that you utilize?
Hmm. Yeah, like putting someone on a pedestal. So I'm somebody who provides and holds the space for you to have your experience. And you are the one who's doing the work. And I always remind people of that. I remind people that this this molecule is not a magic pill. It's not what changes you, what transforms you. It's you. And so I'm always like, it's very true that the second somebody really could, um they come back online after being very, very deep in a ceremony, and they might, look outward and they're like, thank you, like to me, like I gave, as if I gave them that experience, but it's really them. And so I'm just really committed to always reminding people of that, because I know that can be a pitfall, right? It's just, but I'm providing that, I'm holding that space. My responsibility is keeping that person safe, and they're really doing the work. And I'm like a guide, but yeah. So I just remind people that they're the one who did the work. You're the one who surrendered. I can't do it for you. You know, they did it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
would say.
think, and that was true for my experience with you. Cause yeah, I was acutely aware that that was another thing that kept echoing in my head throughout the experience, is like, this is why I do this. And it was talking about the experience itself. It was talking about my work with Anarchapulco. It was talking about my life in general. But yeah, it really does tap you into like reminding you just how strong you actually are. Or the opposite side, like my first experience with this medicine, I was told, "Oh, you're gonna feel so much love and happiness," and I had watched videos of people partaking in these ceremonies, and I was like, "I'm ready." And then I went into it, and it was partially the way in which the ceremony was set up, right? It was also partially what was trapped inside of me was I was fucking mad. I was big mad, like I had a montage of all the reasons, very valid reasons I had to be pissed. And I was ignoring them for the sake of, I didn't want to think ill of the dead being my ex. I didn't want to look at the truth of that situation because it would make it worse, right? And sometimes that's kind of what you need to have to deal with to be able to move forward. But also what I've found more and more as time goes on and I have more experiences of this nature, I realized that I am still that, like, little barefoot kid in her sundress running around with her popsicle and a big smile on her face, and,
You are.
I think that's why people come out of it with gratitude. I think for me, I know that you're just facilitating me or people you're working with to be more of themselves, but you're almost like a portal in a way, from one side to the other of like, here's some tools, try them
Hmm.
that can like snap you into it. And I think that's because I was also one of those people that was like, thank you, but also like I meant that both to you and to Vinaya, who's your partner. He was there. He happened to be there during my ceremony. I don't know if he's there during everybody's. Um,
Yeah. Yes.
but
I always
also
have
to
my
myself. Yeah. So there's something else that I wanted to talk about. I have a list here. This is it. And I think I've asked you this because I've asked you like, "Hey, can you mentor me?" Because I realized that, for me personally, for my human design, I am here to make a bunch of mistakes, learn from them, and come out as the role model. Well, like I've been assessing what does that mean? I'm starting to realize that I want to help people who have gone through similar things to me, like people who have had a life of chronic stress that end up with hormone imbalances and all the other things. So I'm like, hey, can you train me? And we've had conversations, privately like this, but I want to know um, because you trained in dozens of things, everything from Mayan womb massage to pelvic floor to, all of the various things. If you could start over and like hyper focus your training, what would you hyper focus on?
Ooh, gosh, I don't know, because truly, when you asked me that question, I think all of that stuff was necessary. All of
Right.
those trainings were necessary for me, because also it was part of my own healing, right? So as you get trained in these types of modalities, you go through the process, right? So when you learn pelvic floor release, you're also receiving pelvic floor release so that, you actually know what it's like and you benefit from the experience. Gosh, that's a really difficult question for me. Um, I think for you, what I said was the Mayan abdominal massage, because it's kind of like all of it into one. Um, that's a really good question. I don't
Yeah.
know the I don't
And
know
and
the
I know
answer.
and I know
I'll
that you're
probably know.
I know you're still looking for the answer, and I know, like, on the Mayan womb massage thing, I remember listening to an audiobook recently and hearing about the bone closing ceremony or something of that nature, and it's another one of
Modalities.
these Mayan traditions, and I was like, "Piazza has to know about this. Have you done
Yeah,
this?" We're like, "No, but that sounds awesome," like.
yeah.
And for those who are curious, it's apparently a ceremony that is most commonly given to women who are postpartum, like after having a baby, to put their body back together. Because when you have a child, energetically, physically, you are busted open, right? But also, it's given to people who go through any sort of trauma. And it's literally like a woman wrapping you up as tight as possible, like a baby swaddled with scarves and moving you around and shaking you and like compressing you. Um, yeah, I want to find somebody to do that with.
Yeah,
So,
I would be interested in that training, actually.
yeah, I
I
mean,
like
it sounds
stuff done,
awesome.
but there's always so much more interesting out there to learn. Yeah,
Right.
swaddling, and it reminds me also of the weighted blankets, because
Mhm.
it's like that weight is giving a security to the nervous system, right? That compression. But I'm sure, being a Mayan practice, it's like very deep. There's got to be very
Yeah.
multi-layered.
On the weighted blanket thing, it's funny, because my partner he's pretty similar in size. He's taller than me, but pretty similar in like size and weight to me. And I will regularly ask him when I'm just feeling stressed out, I'm like, "Can you come lay on me for a minute?" And he
Hmm.
will. He'll just put his weight on me and just lay there. And there is that instant, like, you would think that it would be hard to breathe, but I feel like I can breathe more in that instance. I think that's why I'm attracted to it. But in the book that I was reading, it was this woman, and she was essentially like this super Christian woman married to a pastor, and her husband cheated on her, and she left her marriage and everything, and then she heard about the ceremony, she was describing it, and it kinda made me laugh, but it made it sound even more appealing because she was like, "Yeah, and I was there, and then all of a sudden I was like, 'What the fuck am I doing here? I can't breathe. Who are you? Why are you doing this to me?'" And the woman just kept, like, doing the ceremony, and then she started crying, and then she sunk into it, and then, by the end of it, she was like, "Oh, that's the process." And I think that's a thing that a lot of people go through when they go through these sorts of things, is something that I talked to with Emma and with Selena on my recent episode, is, like, getting to that point of being like, "What the fuck is this?" And then getting beyond it. And it feels like that's a lot of what your work is about.
And that is very true. Yeah, I appreciate that. There's moments when people look at me in ceremony, like there's a particular moment where sometimes it happens where it's like, what the fuck is this? Like, where the absolute fear, because with this molecule, what happens is your default mode network, your ego, goes offline. And so it is often this experience of, we think that we're dying. And so this big fear comes up, and it's like, the fuck? And then when you get through that, And I like to use the word lately. I've been sometimes, saying like allowing rather than surrender, because surrender can be a big, scary word for some people. So sometimes I'll choose the word allow, just allowing the medicine to work through you or allowing yourself to feel and stay present to pleasure. That's also something that I help a lot of women do, because there's, like with this whole go, go, go culture and this whole left brain thing, it's often very difficult for a woman and men too, to just be present and just feel sensation, right? Just to relax and receive, right? So the masculine doing, left brain, ego, the feminine, um, allowing, intuitive, emotional, right? But we need
Right.
both. Even when I say the word ego, like that's not meant as a criticism. We need the ego, right? And the ego comes back. But there is a moment where we're completely letting it go and there's absolute fear. So it is kind of like that what the fuck moment that you were mentioning, where she's like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden, pah! I see that a
Yeah.
lot. I see that a lot, actually.
I mean, and I've had many experiences with that. And like, bringing it back to the aerial thing, there's so many people, they look at what I do and they're like, "Oh, I could just simply not do that." And I tell people and they always look at me like I have three heads and I'm like, "If you have hands, you can do this if you want to." 70% of what I do with the aerial stuff is not about strength, it's not about flexibility, it's about the brain. It's about the monkey mind that's saying, "No, we can't do that because of this reason, because I'm fat, because I'm this, or I'm not flexible, or I've never worked out." Um, but like part of why I say if you have hands is I've seen women without feet and without their lower extremities, with, legs only down to just above their knees, doing aerial silks and doing pole dancing, and the biggest hurdle I think most of us deal with when it comes to anything in our lives is really that limit of the mind. And I know there are a lot of people are like, you don't need to do, you know, entheogenic experiences. You don't need to do any of this weird stuff, right, to get to these places. But I think that, in essence, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I wonder if you agree with that, is these experiences, they are necessary. And the reason so many people say, "Hey, so this is like 5 years of therapy in one session." Okay, so why is that? Like, what makes it like that? And I think it's really about that, um, about that part of it. Would you agree with that?
Um, yes. And I have heard the 5 years of therapy in one session or all of that. And it is, but whether we're going to hold on to it or not and really make it a new way of being is up to you. Each individual person. Like it may just be like, wow, that was amazing. Oh, I knew everything and everything is perfect. I'm perfect. Everything's okay, and I love being here in a body in this present moment. And then, if there's not the integration uh to really help those neural pathways form and stabilize, then it'll just be gone.
Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah. The thing that I noticed, and when I say that I don't have any more pain in my cyst issue that I was having, when I say that I lost weight, it's not like I continued eating the same way, existing the same way, and as I was before, and the weight just came off. It's not like it's like like a GLP-1 or something like that. But for me, it was reminding me that I could take charge. It re-inspired me. I
Mm.
doubled down on eating food that felt good in my body, that was high in protein, that was, good for my system. I committed to that. And then I committed to a training regimen basically of the aerial combined with weight training that felt good in the body, and I also learned to rest when I needed to and things like that. So it does take that follow up afterwards. This is not a magic pill of like, okay, you're cured now. Just go on about your life and everything's going to be normal.
That's right.
Um, but you might discover solutions and a
Hmm.
plan. And above that, you might have already gone into this knowing that if you do this thing, it's going to lead to this thing, but you're going to have the drive to actually do it. And I also wanted to talk about your role with Anarchapulco, because my understanding is you started as a speaker, but we have really, whenever it's lined up in terms of all of our schedules working, we have really leaned into having you play a specific role at Anarchapulco. And I don't even know what the term for it is, but I do know that anybody who was there this year probably saw you floating around like a fairy, giving people smells, giving people hugs, talking to people when necessary. Like there were a few times where I was like this, and I would just feel your hands on my shoulders, and okay, decompress, like. So
Hmm.
I want to know um what that role means to you, like
Hmm.
at
You know
Anarchapulco.
what? I love what Kat said to me when I think I had missed two Anarchapulcos. Like I had been, I don't even know what year my first year was, but then there were 8 years, maybe total, 7 years, I'm not sure. I originally came to speak on the main stage, invited by Jeff Berwick to talk about circumcision. And because that's like one of the original traumas that, of trauma-based mind control that we don't people a lot of people don't even think about. But anyways, so yeah, I was speaking, doing retreats for or workshops over the years. And last year, and I was doing what I would call mediation. Years back at the Secret Garden, I do remember being there having the same role. And when I asked Kat, "Hey, Kat, how do you feel about me coming back this year?" And she said, "Awesome. What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I said, what role do you want me to play?" That's what I said. And she said, "I just want you to be yourself." And Kat has this incredible way of really empowering all of those who are on the team and all of those who are involved in Anarchapulco. I think it's a really special gift that she has, that she really empowers people to bring out their gifts. So my role was um, taking care of staff and also mediation if there were any arguments or any disputes of any kind with the participants of Anarchapulco or with the staff to keep everything flowing smooth and easy. So that might be anything from, yeah, like just seeing your shoulders up in your ears as you're like running the stage and doing all these things nonstop for a week and, way before, to just bringing awareness to that and some touch and some love, to, yeah, mediating a dispute, to, yeah, bringing smells. So yeah, my role is to bring love.
I love
Love
what you
and
had to say about that. Because Kat, that is her role, Her role is twofold. It's to do that, and it's also to bring accountability for better or for worse. And she can, some people can criticize her for that. But the beauty of it is like, and you were brought, I think I remember, into like the mediation role, because there's always going to be something that happens and somebody's going to be very upset and very emotional and not feel very good. And Kat and I both, when we are at Anarchapulco, we are making sure that the ship stays afloat. And so we can't always stop and be like, "Oh yes, let me hear what you're saying. Let me hear what you're feeling. Let me hold you while you cry. Let me, whatever." It's just it's just not possible. And we have seriously felt your absence in the years that you've not been there. And it's usually you are off somewhere in the world being yourself and providing your like fairy dust magic to that zone, right? But we are always eternally grateful. There's never been a single encounter I've had that's had anything to do with you where I've been like, actually, we could have did without that. Like, is it a co-producer or stage manager or registration manager specific event planning role? No. But is it just as essential for the sanity of everybody doing all of those roles? I would say absolutely. Um, and I really hope that you'll be doing the same with us next year because yeah, it is so essential, it like I've seen how you handle the conflict and the solutions that you come up with are things like I wouldn't have thought of that in the moment. I've seen how you've walked into a situation to somebody, you know, like so activated and angry and perhaps volatile that we've considered asking them to leave the event and you just walk in and it's like diffusing a bomb almost and then we're able to move forward, right? I think that these things are extremely important. So thank you for that role that you play. Anybody watching this, if you come to Anarchapulco, you just I just invite you to witness what is the Pyasa effect of just being there, the smile, the vibe, the hugs, you're a world-class hugger. Um and yeah. So that I think
Hey,
that's a good note to end this on. And you might just find at the very minimum, new friends, but new family, like for me personally, my experiences with Anarchapulco combined with my experiences at Bambuda, like I keep saying this and maybe people don't believe me, but the reason I'm okay is because I have these people, like I don't, I mean, I feel super blessed that I know without a doubt who I can go to when I need help and when I need assistance. Um, And I'd like to end this on if there's one thing that you could have anybody watching this understand about you, or what you do.
yeah, there could be so many answers. What's coming through right now is really about slowing down and really just slowing down. We're living in such a fast-paced world right now, and there's so much technology, AI, social media, all of these things. So we grow as a community and remember who we are. And in a place where we get to slow down, connect with nature and connect with ourselves and each other. Yeah. Slowing
I
down.
think that's beautiful. Yeah, that's a thing that I struggle with. Is I'm like the Energizer bunny, like I just keep going and going until, my battery dies and I'm collapsed. So thank you, Piazza, again. I'm gonna end that here because I think it's time for me to slow down and go fly through the air for a while. So for watching